Hello, good evening, and welcome back. The Conservatives have decided on a new plan to try and slow down legal immigration. But first, the coronavirus death toll has hit the lowest level since the day after lockdown, which is, of course, fantastic good news, and we can all get back to work now, right? Not quite, I'm afraid. They are still concerned about trying to get a vaccine ready as soon as possible, and only think that we can return to normal once the vaccine is obtained. That is still the narrative of which they wish to push, despite, of course, not having the antibodies tests ready yet, and saying that 1 in 400 people, 0.27% of the population, are infected right now, as of a couple of days ago. So this week then, let's go with that. But on a particular day, still 0.27% of the population. And as I say, that will last about 2 weeks, but this has been going on for several months. So if it is always 0.27% of the population and it refreshes every 2 weeks at least, and it's been going on for a few months, then you have got the reasonable single-digit population already infected, essentially. And of course, most of them have not died, not even close. And once we get the antibody test out, then we'll see that this has actually been around a lot longer if you're trying to get the numbers to fit, and it has been around for the entire year, if not since last year. But hey, we will see that once it comes out. So the UK's daily figure for coronavirus deaths has dropped to 170, the lowest since the day after lockdown began. Let's just hope they're still reporting it the same way. Otherwise, of course, you can manipulate the numbers by saying that people are no longer dying of coronavirus when they're not dying of coronavirus, as yes, that would actually make a change. So the announcement comes a week after the first easing of restrictions in England, and while numbers are typically lower on Sundays, the figure is almost 100 fewer than the 268 reported a week ago, and it is following a downward trend. Yes, we're expecting it to be lower at the weekend, and then it'll raise again during the week, as we see here, and therefore the 7-day rolling average is far more important to take stock in, and as we can see, it has definitely decreased substantially. We haven't just flattened the curve, we have actually made another curve of going down, in which case we've definitely done what was set out to be done, unless what was set out to be done isn't what was said to be set out to done, which it seems like that is the case. So, as Business Secretary Alok Sharma said, the country was moving towards level 3 of the coronavirus alert system, which would see the gradual relaxation of restrictions, but to definitively conquer this disease, we need to find a safe, workable vaccine. In that vein of thought, he said that the clinical trial for a COVID-19 vaccine at the University of Oxford was progressing well and announced £93 million to spend to speed up a new vaccine research lab. They've already invested $47 million. They've put another $84 million into it. And if this trial is successful, 30 million doses will be available for the UK by this September as part of a 100 million dose agreement. Of course, the official population is not nearly 100 million, but nonetheless, of course, I suppose that's what they have to be prepared for, just in case, don't you know? And if, apparently, getting the virus means that you're not immune, well, that is the way the vaccines work, because vaccines aren't a cure. They are giving you a weakened form of it, and then reliant on your immune system to fight it off, and then remember what they fought in order to fight it again in the future when the actual virus comes around. So if getting the virus means you are not immune to it, then these vaccines will have to be administered frequently, just like booster shots, which you get for MRSA, that of course you get your booster shot at about 10 years of age, and then you should be done from then on for the rest of life, and things like tetanus you get every 10 years or so, because you need those booster shots. There seems to be a similar thing here, but of course there is the thought that it'll be seasonal, in which case you need a new one every year. These are not booster shots, these are new flu vaccines or new coronavirus vaccines. So with that in mind, that they are trying to get the entire population vaccinated, then of course they're putting in so much more funding, and particularly the business secretary said if it is a successful vaccine and it is available later this year, we will need to be in a position to manufacture it at scale and quickly. So whilst the centre is being built, the government will establish a rapid deployment facility thanks to a further investment of £38 million. This isn't developing vaccines that haven't yet been approved, as some people are doing, but is instead just getting the framework in place, so once it is approved, it can be done a lot quicker. That is the idea, because as we all know anyway, any government plan takes a hell of a long time to get to working, in which case it is good if that is their incentive to get the planning done as soon as possible so that we can get those vaccines as soon as possible. Whether or not we'll be allowed to opt out of them is yet to be decided, but hopefully we can still maintain with our basic level of liberty and decide that although we can't put things in our body that we want to, hopefully we can decide to not put things in our body that we don't want to. And with that in mind, with the death toll decreasing and people being able to get back to work, the new fight from the Conservatives of their new immigration bill has returned to the Commons. So it's a new points-based immigration system, because we all love those points-based systems, which moves a step closer to becoming law as proposed legislation appears before MPs. So the idea here is to promote a high-skill economy, apparently, although that isn't quite true. As they say that critics said the coronavirus pandemic has changed public attitudes towards those considered unskilled. And it's very difficult to say when it comes to higher pay that higher pay doesn't necessarily mean more skill. It just means that there is less of a supply, and therefore it could be a risky job, for example, and people who do risky jobs, it could be in septic tanks and sewage, or it could be skyscraper building at the top of masts, telephone lines, that kind of thing, for example, that they would get paid more because it is more of a dangerous job. You want to make sure that your dry suit is very well sealed off before stepping in sewage, for example. So it isn't necessarily a skilled job, but the danger money is considerable in order to make up for that. For example, the fishermen, the danger money in that, depending on where you're going, if it's crab fishing, that kind of thing, because of the high fatality rate, similarly with logging, then it can be a simple job, but they get paid a lot because people don't want to do it, because it seems it's almost likely that they will die if they do it for a few seasons. But nonetheless, they are doing the same thing here with particularly healthcare workers, they're saying, but also, of course, for manual labourers, which people aren't allowed to go out at the moment and realise that, hey, these jobs are actually important for keeping infrastructure going. And yes, they are indeed, but let's not conflate important with skilled. Bear in mind, humans have been around for millions of years, and we haven't always been skilled, which suggests that some unskilled work is actually necessary. You could argue that all the necessary work is actually unskilled, because if it required a skill, then it would be too difficult for us to do, and so if it was necessary as well, we wouldn't have been able to do it and survive as long as we have. So let's not confuse the two. But strict criteria, they say. So, Patel said, "We will no longer have the roots for cheap, low-skilled labour that obviously has dominated immigration and our labour market for far too long in this country." However, a YouGov opinion poll commissioned by the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants suggests 54% of people now support looser immigration controls for work regarded as essential during the pandemic. And of course, it has to be incredibly particular, otherwise 80% of people do not want more immigration. They would rather it was substantially less. And of course, that is the lower estimate. You can go up to the mid-90s, depending on who you're sampling and how you're asking the question. So, that Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants, Satbir Singh, said such workers are not unskilled or unwelcome. They are the backbone of our country, and they deserve the security of knowing that this place can be their home too. By all means. By all means. And if they are that important, and it is unskilled, there'll be a load of people in England who can do it, and those skills will be needed, or those necessities will need to be completed in their home country as well, and it would not be fair to remove them. The same goes for the brain drain argument. So the government announced proposals for the new system, suggesting points will be awarded for being able to speak English to a certain standard, having a job offer from an approved employer, and meeting a salary threshold of £25,600. However, other points could be awarded for certain qualifications and if there is a shortage in a particular occupation. And I think that last one is the one that would be agreed upon even by more ardent nationalists, to say, well, yes, if there is a definite particular need and we need a particular person from a particular country in order to help fill that goal, then we will ask that person to come out and we will reward them, because the necessity stipulates that we need them right now and we don't have anybody else. We can't wait for that to be filled after a few years of education. We actually need that now. It isn't a large swathe we need, it is one particular person who is a particular specialist in their field, in which case, fair enough. But The other stipulations, not quite, especially given that you've got to be earning over 32 grand a year in order to actually be a net contributor, given the tax rates and how much is subsidized, that you are a net taker if you're earning less than that. Yes, if you're earning less than what would put you in the top 1% of income earners globally. But nonetheless, I would strongly suggest then that anyone who wishes to come to the UK would have to be a net contributor, surely. So 25,600 is far too low. Far too low. Because you need them to be a net contributor. That is the idea, especially considering they will most likely be bringing over their families as well, which means you've got to be earning more to offset the amount that your family is taking if you wish to be a net contributor before, of course, your children become net contributors, but that will take a couple of decades at least, or a couple of decades if you're lucky and you've got a 21-year-old who can earn 32 grand, but good luck with a good university course for that. So, as they say, a visa allowing doctors, nurses and health professionals from overseas to work in the NHS was introduced in March. The Brexit transition period ends on 31st of December, after which the new immigration rules will apply. Or sooner. So Ms Patel said, "This historic piece of legislation gives the UK full control of our immigration system for the first time in decades and the power to determine who comes to this country. Our new points-based system is firmer, fairer and simpler. It will attract the people we need to drive our economy forward and lay the foundation for a high-wage, high-skill, high-productivity economy." Which suggests that she's really missing the point and suggesting it's, all hail the GDP god. And that isn't really the point. The point is to try and have a country of which you can be born in, raised in, support and be supported by, and actually feel that sense of community and camaraderie and know that it is safe to walk around, for example, and you can even go to places all around the UK after dark and not face the concern of being shot. Wouldn't that be nice? And also not having such an agenda being pushed by any of the legacy media which is against indigenous people. In any other context, we would call this imperialist racism. But hey, I guess there's a pass here. But let's see what they do. Perhaps it's too soon to tell, and I doubt the Conservatives will actually follow on this anyway, seeing as they haven't followed on that promise that they've been suggesting that they'll be keeping for years. So, until next time, as always, have a good one.